Iran announces closure of Strait of Hormuz. All foreign warships unwelcome.
The headline scrolling across the bottom of the screen is one U.S. commanders have dreaded for decades. Iran announces closure of Strait of Hormuz. All foreign warships unwelcome. Within hours, satellite photos leak online lines of Iranian fast attack boats streaming out from their bases, coastal missile batteries coming to life on the cliffs, and suspicious patterns at sea that look a lot like fresh mine laying in one of the world's most critical shipping lanes. Almost 1/5 of the planet's oil moves through that narrow stretch of water. Overnight, it's gone from busy sea lane to a potential war zone. Half a world away, a U.S. carrier strike group receives new orders. Crews sprint across the flight deck. Jets are being re-armed in the hangar bay, and encrypted messages flash between ships as another carrier group is diverted toward the Gulf. On the screens inside the White House Situation Room, an armada of gray hulls is now on a direct path toward a chokepoint Iran claims it can shut. This isn't a movie trailer. This is how a real collision course between Iran and the U.S. Navy could begin. The story of a closed Strait of Hormuz doesn't actually start with a dramatic announcement on television. It begins quietly, months or even years earlier, in rooms most people never see. At U.S. Central Command in Tampa, analysts sit in front of walls of screens, watching slow, subtle changes that don't make headlines but always get logged. Iranian missile units are rotating more frequently through coastal positions. Revolutionary Guard naval drills are getting bigger, more complex, and a little closer to the shipping lanes each time. Hardline voices in Tehran are talking more openly about using all tools to respond to sanctions. None of this proves a crisis is coming, but together it looks like dry kindling stacking up around a very small, very crowded patch of ocean. On a map, the Strait of Hormuz is just a thin-shaped gap between Iran and Oman. In real life, it's one of the most important choke points on Earth. Massive oil tankers and LNG carriers push through its narrow lanes every day, escorted by tugs and quietly shadowed by warships. Insurance companies, energy traders, and national governments from Asia, Europe, and the United States depend on that traffic continuing hour after hour without interruption. Iran's leaders know exactly how valuable that vulnerability is. For decades, they've hinted, sometimes threatened outright, that if their own economy is strangled, they can retaliate by threatening the world's oil supply. They don't have to defeat the U.S. Navy in open battle. All they have to do is make the strait feel too risky for companies to send their ships through. That can mean laying mines under cover of darkness, deploying swarms of fast attack boats armed with rockets and anti-ship missiles, moving mobile missile launchers along the coast, and pushing drones and surveillance aircraft overhead to watch every move. In our scenario, a new wave of sanctions pushes Iran's already fragile economy to the edge. Protests ripple through major cities. Inside the Revolutionary Guard, hardliners argue that only a bold, dangerous move will force Washington to ease the pressure. Behind closed doors, they push a high-stakes option, publicly declare that foreign warships are no longer welcome in the Strait of Hormuz, and back up that threat with real military activity at sea. Late one night, Iranian state TV breaks into regular programming. A stern spokesman announces that hostile foreign warships are banned from the Gulf and the Strait for the security of the Islamic Republic. Edited footage rolls of fast boats cutting across the wakes of tankers and missiles elevating from camouflage positions on the coast. It's part threat, part theater, but this time U.S. satellites and allied intelligence confirm it's not just for the cameras. There's unusual mine-laying behavior in approaches to the strait. A Gulf partner reports its tanker was ordered to change course by armed Iranian patrols. In Washington, top defense and intelligence officials are pulled into an emergency secure video call with the president. No one is shocked that Tehran is talking tough. Iran has made similar threats for years. What's different now is the combination of words and unmistakable military movement around the choke point. The core question is brutally simple. Does the United States accept, even symbolically, that a regional power can close an international waterway? Or does it challenge the threat head-on and risk a clash that could ignite the entire region? While diplomats rush to open back-channel communication through neutral states like Oman and Switzerland, the Pentagon quietly executes plans that have been refined over decades. A U.S. carrier strike group already in range is placed on high alert. Another is ordered to leave its current station and head toward the Arabian Sea. Amphibious ships carrying Marines adjust their routes. U.S. Air Force bombers and surveillance aircraft in the region. Review updated target lists for Iranian radar sites, missile batteries, and naval bases. To the public, it still looks like a war of words. Behind the scenes, the pieces for a very real confrontation are sliding into place. As the U.S. armada closes in, it's important to understand what that actually looks like at sea. A carrier strike group isn't just one big ship. At its center is a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, essentially a floating airport and command center, packed with dozens of F-18s or FD-5s, electronic warfare aircraft, surveillance planes, and helicopters. Around it sails a protective ring of guided missile destroyers and cruisers, each bristling with vertical launch cells loaded with air defense missiles and long-range strike weapons. Somewhere beneath the surface, at least one attack submarine rides silently, listening for enemy submarines and watching key approaches. In our scenario, that initial group is reinforced by another carrier strike group and several allied warships. For countries like the UK, France, and Japan, the Strait of Hormuz isn't an abstract map feature. It's a vital artery for their own economies. They have a direct interest in making sure no single state gets to shut it down. Overhead, U.S. Air Force AWACS radar planes, tankers, and reconnaissance jets begin creating a persistent, layered picture of the air and sea space around the strait. From space, satellites track missile movements, naval deployments, and any sign of new mine laying. Iran is not passive while all this unfolds. Along its coastline, Revolutionary Guard units roll out mobile anti-ship missiles from hardened shelters, positioning them under camouflage netting on ridgelines and cliffs. Coastal radar sites blink in and out of operation, probing the skies without staying on long enough to become easy fixed targets. Patrol boats and fast attack craft disperse from their bases, mingling with ordinary fishing vessels and commercial ships. Some are visibly armed. Others may be loaded with hidden weapons or explosives, ready for suicide attacks if war breaks out. Overhead, Iranian drones take up orbits, watching every move the armada makes. The first phase of this collision course is not a salvo of missiles. It's a dangerous test of nerve, perception, and signaling. U.S. destroyers begin what Washington calls freedom of navigation operations, sailing courses that demonstrate its view of international law in and around the strait. Iranian boats race toward them, cutting close across their bows and broadcasting warnings in accented English. American warship, you are entering a restricted zone. Alter course immediately. Inside the Combat Information Center of one U.S. destroyer, the atmosphere is focused and tense. Radar screens show dozens of returns, big tankers, tiny dhows, supply vessels, and a handful of small, fast-moving contacts lifting off from the Iranian side. Operators tag each one. Known commercial, unknown, likely Iranian unit. Another console tracks an unmanned aircraft overhead, identified as Iranian, orbiting just outside the range where it might be shot down. On a main tactical display, icons mark where intelligence believes Iranian missile batteries and command posts are hidden inland. The rules of engagement, the legal framework that decides when U.S. forces can fire, are clear on paper but blurry in practice. A legal officer quietly reads the key line to the captain again. U.S. forces may use force if a vessel displays hostile intent or commits a hostile act. But in real time, what does that look like? A boat closing fast? A visible weapon on deck? A radio threat? In a cluttered, high-pressure environment, one mistaken call can lead to firing too soon or too late. Everyone in that room knows how much history hangs over their decisions. In 1988, during the so-called Tanker War, a U.S. frigate struck an Iranian mine, and Washington responded with Operation Praying Mantis, smashing much of Iran's navy and offshore platforms in a matter of hours. Later that year, in the chaos of a surface engagement, the USS Vincennes mistakenly shot down a civilian Iranian airliner, killing nearly 300 people. Those events are still studied in U.S. and Iranian war colleges. They are cautionary tales about how fast a limited clash at sea can turn into tragedy. As days pass without a shot being fired, the pressure doesn't ease, it builds. Oil prices spike. Insurance rates for any tanker even thinking about transiting the strait skyrocket. Some shipping companies reroute through longer, more expensive paths. Others halt traffic entirely, waiting to see whether the U.S. will begin formally escorting commercial ships, and whether Iran is really willing to challenge a convoy ranged by destroyers and combat air patrols. Behind closed doors, American officials tell allies bluntly, if we let Iran set a precedent here, every coastline in the world becomes a bargaining chip. At the same time, they send back-channel messages to Tehran. The U.S. doesn't seek war, but it will not accept a declared closure of an international waterway. Somewhere between those two positions, a solution has to be found, or the next tense encounter at sea will force one. To see how close this can come to the edge, zoom all the way into a single morning in our scenario. Just after sunrise, a U.S. guided missile destroyer is moving through one of the key approaches toward the strait. The sea is relatively calm, the sky washed in dusty light. On radar, a cluster of small, fast-moving contacts lifts off from the Iranian shoreline and accelerates into the ship's general path. They're not broadcasting commercial ID. To the crew, they look exactly like Revolutionary Guard speedboats. On the bridge and in the operations center below, voices stay calm but tight. Sailors call out bearings and ranges. Multiple fast contacts closing, speed increasing. Weapons crews stand by at their stations. The ship's close-in gun mounts silently track, ready to fire if ordered. Overhead, a U.S. helicopter angles toward the swarm to keep eyes on them, while an Iranian drone continues circling in the distance, watching everything from above. The Iranian boats push in to within a few hundred yards. Some crews hold up cameras, clearly filming the encounter for domestic propaganda. Others remain more hidden behind tarps and superstructures, where any number of weapons could be concealed. Through loudspeakers and maritime radio, they repeat their message. American warship, you are ordered to leave this area. This zone is closed, the U.S. captain, trained to stay steady under exactly this kind of pressure, responds in measured tones. This is a United States warship operating lawfully in international waters. We intend no harm, but we will defend ourselves. That standoff on the water isn't just local. In secure rooms thousands of miles away, senior officials in Washington and Tehran watch real-time feeds and text updates. They know that, in theory, neither government actually wants to be the one that fires first. They also know how fragile that restraint can be when split-second decisions are being made by humans under extreme stress, staring at fast-moving blips on a screen or boats rocking on live water. In our scenario, the U.S. commander chooses a deliberate, calibrated response. He holds his course but authorizes strong non-lethal warnings. Long-range acoustic devices blast powerful tones toward the nearest speedboats. Flares streak into the sky. The helicopter makes a low, loud pass over the lead Iranian craft. It's a way of saying, we are not turning around. And we are not asleep, but we are not firing either. At the last possible moment, the closest boats veer away, giving the destroyer more room as it pushes on. For Iranian domestic media, the footage can be edited to show brave crews confronting the enemy. For U.S. commanders, the important point is simpler. No one fired and no one died. Still, everyone involved understands that this balancing act can't go on indefinitely. The Strait of Hormuz is too important, the waterway too narrow, and the number of guns, missiles, mines, drones, and ships packed into the area too high. The real solution won't be found on a destroyer's bridge. It will be found, if it's found at all, in quiet meeting rooms in neutral capitals, places like Muscat or Doha, where negotiators can talk without cameras. There, behind closed doors, a potential off-ramp takes shape. Iran doesn't want to publicly retract its tough statement. Too much domestic prestige is tied to the claim that it stood up to the United States. But it can agree, off the record, to ease off the most dangerous activities. No new mine laying, fewer deliberate harassment runs by fast attack boats, and missile crews dropping from their highest alert posture. In return, the United States can agree not to stage massive live fire exercises directly inside the strait and publicly restate that it does not seek regime change in Tehran. It's not a friendship. It's a temporary understanding built on mutual fear of what the alternative looks like. To the outside world, the de-escalation looks controlled but fragile. News cameras capture the first escorted tankers making their way through the strait under the watchful eyes of U.S. and allied warships. Oil prices begin to ease, though they remain higher than before the crisis. Analysts argue on cable news over who won. Hawks on both sides complain that their leaders blinked. Doves insist that disaster was narrowly avoided. The truth lives somewhere in between. Iran has proved it can shake global markets and capture the world's attention simply by threatening the strait, moving boats, and rolling out missile launchers. The United States has shown that it will not accept a declared closure and is willing to put carriers, destroyers, and hundreds of lives in harm's way to keep that waterway open. But the deep issues that sparked the confrontation, sanctions, regional rivalry, ideological hostility, haven't gone anywhere. The collision course was eased this time, not erased. The U.S. Armada doesn't just turn around and sail home. Elements of the carrier strike groups remain in the region, continuing joint exercises with partners and maintaining a visible presence. Minesweepers quietly check key shipping channels for any leftover surprises. Intelligence and surveillance flights continue watching Iran's coastline, ready to flag any sign that the crisis is reigniting. Inside the Pentagon, lessons from the standoff are turned into new training scenarios. Clearer communication protocols, refined rules of engagement, better drills for handling swarms of small boats and drones. Inside Iran, the Revolutionary Guard's media arm cuts together slick montages of boats speeding near U.S. ships, missiles elevating on coastal launchers, and crowds chanting in the streets. For domestic audiences, the message is simple. We stood up to the Americans, and they did not dare attack us. But in more sober internal discussions, military professionals acknowledge a harsher reality. If they had gone just a little further, if a mine had ripped open a U.S. hull or a missile crew had panicked and fired, the response could have hammered their navy, their coastal infrastructure, and key command centers within days. The strait remains a lever of influence, but it's also a loaded weapon that can blow back on its owner. For you, watching from thousands of miles away, this kind of scenario might seem like just lines on a map and gray ships on blue water. But a miscalculation in the Strait of Hormuz would do more than endanger sailors on deck. It could shock global energy markets, shake fragile economies, and drag multiple countries into a conflict nobody truly wants. Understanding how these collision courses form and how they're sometimes barely steered away from is part of understanding modern power. If you found this breakdown useful, you're exactly the audience we make this content for. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to Elite U.S. Military, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive, whether it's carrier strike groups shadowing hostile coasts, submarines slipping through contested waters, or special operations units training for missions that never make the news. And if you want a full, step-by-step war game of what an actual U.S.-Iran conflict over the Strait of Hormuz might look like, tell us in the comments. Type Hormuz War Game so we know you're ready for the next level.